Hey everyone, I'm Anthony Rose, founder and CEO at SeedLegals.
I'm Matt Mower. I'm a navigator with the Art of Navigation.
And today we're here to talk about staying focused as a founder. So whether it's COVID, whether it's endless numbers of new features, whether it's being in new markets, whatever, B2B, B2C, founders are always trying to chase the next big thing versus the next thing that your team pings you about 3 minutes later. It bugs me endlessly, and I don't claim to have a solution. So I'm delighted to chat with Matt and see if we can shed more light on the problem space. So Matt, with Agendascope, you're working on exactly this problem space. Over to you.
Yeah, so I do a lot of work with founders, sort of MDs of, let's say, smallish size SMEs and startups funded, and I often have contact with sort of unfunded startups. And one of the challenges that I've seen them all have is, how do you stay focused on what's important to you over the long term, based on two big problems. One, there's no shortage of things coming at you. So what was important yesterday might not be so important today. How do you know that? And how do you keep track of things that become important to you? So you have a discussion about something that's far off in the distance, and you kind of go, well, not important right now. How do you know when it's become important? So this notion that you have to stay focused on some things, but you also have to be able to shift your focus from time to time. And it's really hard. I think as humans, we're not very well wired to do it. So how do we do it given that it's important?
So one of the things I see when I look at pitch decks, and I see many pitch decks, is that companies are going to do a B2C product, and they're going to do B2B, and they're going to sell data, and they're going to build a Tableau data warehouse, and they're going to get onto blockchain. And the founder is thinking all these things are going to impress my investors. And I'm thinking, as a proxy for an investor, all these things mean my money is going down the sink faster because you're building more stuff rather than selling what you've got. So perhaps the problem space that we can explore it maybe fits into two classes, at least in my mind. One of them is sort of pre-product market fit. So you've started a new business, you don't quite know what it's going to be and what's going to stick. So you're trying a few different things. And then the next part is, once your business is growing, scaling, you're then thinking, well, I'm selling these widgets, but do I kill all my R&D? I just sell these widgets forever? Or do I have to make something new? And making something new is what I see often is the jump the shark moment, which is you do small incremental things, and then you think something crazy. We're going to launch an Albonia on the blockchain. And it's like, dude, this was like a step too far. So how do you help companies on the decision making on both the early and the later stage? And is that a good way to separate it?
Yeah, I think so, because we can separate it into two things. We can separate it into stage, and obviously earlier stage business tend to be very focused on investment, whereas later stage business tend to be focused on growth. And also in terms of whether you have or are looking for a product market fit. And I take it slightly further, because there's other things you can talk about beyond product market fit, but I think it's, have you cracked selling a product people want? Because you can kind of have product market fit and still not have a product. And that's where you get into founder selling and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think a key point is most people I meet do not know how to raise investment. That is to say, they don't see investment for what it is, which fundamentally is a selling process. I'm selling a chunk of the future value of my company to somebody who values it more than the present value of their cash. Why would they buy it? And so that leads to people kind of throwing the kitchen sink. It's like, can I give you every buzzword that might interest you, rather than narrowing down and saying what investors should really buy this thing that I'm doing. Founders often massively undersell their mission, which certainly in early stage companies very often is the only thing you've got. Your vision for a better future. You don't have a product, you don't have customers, you don't have revenue. All you really have is a very compelling sense of this is what the future ought to look like. You're therefore looking for investors who go, wow, I really want the future to look like that too. So I think there's an issue here about, do you actually know how to raise investment? So do you know how to speak to investors in a way that talks to the reasons why they want to put money into these companies? And then you raise the other point, which is, which I think is perhaps more primarily what we're talking about here, which is focus. Do you have a product focus? Do you understand what you're trying to do? or are you just in an area and digging around? If you're just in an area digging around going, well, maybe it's blockchain, maybe it's AI, maybe it's drones, maybe it's fintech, you don't really have anything at this point. You probably shouldn't even be looking for investment. You should be trying to decide, what problem am I actually trying to solve? And I think there's a lack of depth of thinking often that goes on there.
So, I mean, I think the problem space is, well, okay, so firstly, an observation, which is in the early stages, you think that your mission is to get people to use your product, but actually you've got two missions. You've got that and get investors to give me money to get to the next piece.
Yes.
So you don't get to the next stage. Either you fund it yourself, bootstrapping, or you have to sell to investors and persuade them. So that aside, I think probably we can constrain the discussion to the slightly more narrow problem space of a company's built something and it's got sort of modest traction. And then the question is what to do to get to that,
what do you do next?
Exactly. So, I've been there in previous startups. One always wants growth to be greater. So let's say, hypothetically, we're making a bicycle lock that's GPS enabled or something, just for something neither of us do. So, it's selling modestly. So now, would you advocate, or what is the method? Do you are you always one feature away from it taking off? Should you give up on it completely and do something else? Is it the fact that it's actually feature complete? Stop building stuff and get on to selling what you've built. How might people go to this sort of problem space in a sort of formulaic way to get to an answer?
So I'm not sure there's one formula, but certainly there's a set of questions that can help drive you. So obviously the first point is, what are your expectations? So if it's selling modestly well, is this a product that you and other smart people think should be selling like hotcakes and everybody should buy one? So to some degree, it depends on what niche have you selected and are you colonizing that niche? A big problem. So I adopt a kind of beachhead and breakout theory. So the idea is you pick a niche that you can colonize quickly. The thing that a lot of people miss when they do this is they don't realize that has to then take you somewhere else. If you colonize a niche that doesn't lead you anywhere and you're sort of stuck there, that's a problem. So you have this breakout notion of, and once we've got all these people using it, that takes us somewhere we want to be. And I've seen this a lot with people selecting a niche that's great, but doesn't support their business and doesn't lead them anywhere. So the first thing is, what should we expect? So if we expect that everybody should be buying this and they're not, then we have to start asking questions about whether the fit is right. There's also a lesser well-known notion that's promoted by a guy called Brian Balfour, which is product channel fit. And you can have product market fit and you can fail to have channel fit, and that can kill you. So, I mean, the way he describes it is, if you're trying to sell through Facebook, your product better fit with Facebook because they're not going to change for you. So you'd look at questions about, are you going through the right channels? So if this ought to be selling well, why isn't it? Now, if your channel fit is right, but your product is not selling, then we have to start asking questions around, did you actually really identify a problem that people wanted to solve? Do you know how to sell? So a key problem that I find over and over is people listen to other people when they're talking about their product and don't factor for the fact that people lie all the time. You asked me, do you want my product? And there's many reasons why I might say that sounds great, which don't equate to, and I'm going to buy it from you. Maybe I don't really understand what it is and I don't want to look stupid. Maybe there's some power dynamic. Maybe I care about you and I don't want to disappoint you. So there's lots of reasons why you can get misled as to where you go. The other thing,
this wry smile that you're seeing is the Mom Test, the book that I advocate all the time. And I think it's one of the basic problems I see, which is founders are obsessed. They think success is building stuff, but the building stuff, I mean, it's hard, but ultimately it's much easier than getting people to want what you've built. So yes, people get started too early on. And exactly as you say, they ask their friends, their mother. So go off to Amazon, it's like £10 for the Mom Test book.
Yep.
And it's called the Mom Test because you ask your mother, Mom, I've got this amazing GPS-enabled bicycle lock with Wi-Fi on blockchain. And she goes, I've idea what you're talking about, but my son, he's such a clever boy. Of course it's a good idea, but she hasn't ridden a bicycle for 50 years. So
Yes. Well, I think there's a couple of, so that's a very good way of determining, do you have a proposition somebody will understand? There's also, I mean, there are clear dangers in who you ask and your ability to actually survey people. I mean, qualitative research is a skill people learn because it's actually quite hard. Cognitive bias tends to mean that we ask questions that lead to the answers that we want. So I've seen people create questionnaires which clearly are leading to the answer that they want. And I think you raise a really good point, which is most people don't want to do any of this. It's messy and it's hard. They'd much rather tinker with the product. Now, there's a really big problem with the tinkering with the product approach. Any product is often the result of hundreds, potentially thousands of decisions. And it's starting with some decision like, is this an app on a phone? Is it a website? And coming down to, should this button be green or red or what have you? The problem is when things go wrong, if you imagine this tree of decisions you've made and there's this one path that leads to where you are, the tendency is you go back to the last few decisions you made and go, what did we do wrong? You don't go back to the top and say, hey, maybe this should have been a website after all. And that can lead people to churn endlessly where it can't help them. I mean, if the answer was a car, no variation of skateboard ever gets you to where you need to be. So I think there's many pitfalls for the unwary. And one of the challenges that I have with clients is holding them to a point where they go, you know what, I'm actually confident that the product hypothesis, the problem that we think we're solving, is real, and here's the evidence why. It's not just my gut tells me or some smart person told me. It's like we have actually done some research on people. We've asked questions. We've identified real pain points. I mean, a classic problem that I get all the time is you ask somebody if this is a problem and they say yes, and you think great. But the reality is it's problem number 6 for somebody who on a good day gets to problem number 4. So yeah, it's a problem. In abstract, yeah, I'd love to fix it. In reality, you go, do you want this? And they go, well, I'm too busy fixing these other problems right now. So there's all kinds of things that can trip you up. And you really need a process to get you out of it. Otherwise, you're stuck reactively thinking all of the time.
So I think we all know with banks, they're too big to fail. I think maybe in product, it's sort of too entrenched to change. And isn't that the gist of it, which is you've started off, once upon a time, you had an idea. You hadn't really validated it. You've gotten a bunch of people to follow you on your journey through the desert. And now halfway into the desert, it turns out, there's not a lot of water and it's hot and you're dying slightly, and the product isn't taking off. So you're now fiddling around in the product. Well, we'll add a follow feature and we'll add a notifications button and we'll add a discover tab or something like that. But the central problem is it's just not serving a need. And so, of course, as a founder, it's really hard. It's really easy to work with your UX and your tech team to go, hey, team, let's add some more features. Yep. What you can't do, and now I ask you, how do you do it? To go, team, we fucked up big time. Nobody wants the shit in the first place. We need to do a take 2. We're going to roll the dice again. We've got the investment money. We're going to make a different product. You can't really do that. So how might you gently go that route?
There is a different way of approaching this. So absolutely, it is often as you describe, and the answer tends to be to engineer more features, which very often simply confuses a product that was not being very well adopted in the first place.
Right.
And often removing features might be a better bet to arrive at a core that does something. But the challenge very often in developing software products, and that's really where I come from, so primarily that's what I look at, is connecting what you're doing, features that you build and the way they work, to what the business actually wants. In what happens in most businesses, there's this sort of nebulous connection between the business people saying, well, I want to pursue these customers, and product people saying, I want to build this product. And they sort of align enough that everybody goes, well, we're kind of on the same mission if you squint a little bit. But there's very, very rarely a direct connection between I want 100 people signed up, or I want revenue to increase by 3,200 MRR a month, to this is what we're building. There is a tool called impact mapping, which I've been a proponent of for a number of years, which is meant to be exactly this kind of connection. So it basically ties together the business outcome you want and what you want development to do. Now, you can still get it wrong, because you can say, well, I think if we speed up the onboarding process by 30 seconds, we'll be able to get 1,000 more people as users. Okay, so we speeded it up to 20 seconds and that wasn't really doing anything. Do we think taking another 10 seconds off will start to move the needle, or should we look somewhere else? So you can use a tool like that to do what I would call a creative discovery process of, we have this hypothesis about value, how do we derive that through building bits of product? And that can also help in the sense of when the CEO meets with an investor says smart thing that they just heard from somebody else, and the CEO bounces back and say, hey, it's blockchain now. You can point to the map and go, well, how does blockchain relate to the goals of the business? And if actually you've had an insight, it's like, well, actually blockchain changes everything, here's how, you can do that on the map. If it's kind of, well, no, then it's like, well, maybe we'll put it down here at number 9, and when we've done numbers 1 to 8, we can look at it again. So a tool like that helps you manage why you're building what you're building. And this has a corollary that is exceptionally powerful. In my experience, most of the time, developers are very well-meaning, want to build something great, but are hampered by the fact that the people who are driving the business are generally not developers, don't really understand how software is developed, and tend to be very over-prescriptive of means. So they start to say, I need it to do exactly this, which kind of leaves the developer in the situation and go, well, okay, I'm not really quite sure why I'm doing this or what you expect to do, but I'll try and do what you're telling me, rather than here's a goal. Hey, amazing developers we've hired, make that happen somehow. And so you can also hamper the good people you have by not allowing them to really do their job.
So totally nobody in development has ever heard that problem of the marketing people telling the developers what to do. And separately, the developers coming up with super technical, brilliant solutions that it turns out nobody doesn't meet a real user need.
Nobody needs, exactly.
So
it works from both of those functions, yes.
Exactly. So, but I think very much in the space then is one of the things I see, particularly in larger companies, it seems to me to be incredibly inefficient, which is the way decisions are made. So in this, so we're talking about focus and putting it in there. It might be separately on innovation, but you now have your set of possible things you might do. Is it the tech team driving, going, we can do this super easily, and this is a good platform feature? Or is it the marketing people going, we need to increase our SaaS revenue, which is a fairly lofty and, of course, necessary, but ill-defined goal? How do you go from the highfalutin, our numbers will be 300% up next year, that's our goal, to the feature we can do? So is impact mapping the answer, and is it really sort of that quadrant of ease and value, or is it something else?
It's partly the answer. So whenever you're trying to do anything modestly difficult, you enter the realm of strategy. So when the answer is not sort of, well, obviously you do this, now we're talking about strategy and making long-term decisions. And the difficulty there is, one, forming a coherent view between different people who have very different perspectives, which is itself a challenge. Two, that view incorporate what's different over time. Most of the time what happens is you have the annual strategy review, the strategy is set, and then 12 months later you have another one. The fact that the strategy was probably not fit for purpose 3 months later doesn't really enter the picture. So one thing is really working out, what does this mean? Which is a thing of asking, well, how would you achieve this? And when you don't know the answer to that, and very likely you don't, how do you have an iterative process where you navigate to where you do have the answer, or where you realize the answer isn't what you wanted it to be? So the first thing is even defining what these things mean. So looking at the outcomes that the business wants. So, I mean, MRR could be an outcome. So, for example, if you're a relatively small-sized business looking to do a Series A, then the Series A would be your outcome, and somewhere in there will be an objective about raising MRR. Then it's a decision about the business. What is the best way of doing that? Is it adding SaaS revenue somehow? Is it how do we do that? Now, there's never a single answer to that. You just come up with the best answer you can, which is either going to be broadly right or wrong. What's really important is knowing if it's wrong. And this is the thing that most often is missing from decision making, is actually when did we find out we were wrong? Well, we found out at the point where we ran out of cash. Not helpful. Could we have found out 6 months earlier when we still had enough room to do something different? So actually defining the terms of, if we're right, what does that look like? If we're wrong, what does that look like? And can we even measure that? Are we equipped to measure that? Bigger companies struggle because they very often lack an ability to measure anything usefully. Right. Measurement is often a game, and people learn how to optimize games. So if you've given me this number, I'll do what it takes to optimize it, however much that might destroy other bits of the company. You can see this in product funnels. So you have the top layer of the funnel, which is marketing. You have the middle layer of the funnel, which is the sort of product development. You have the bottom layer of the funnel, which is customer success. All of them have their metrics for success. Well, the easiest way for marketing often to meet their metric for success is just toss a load of rubbish leads in there. They hit their numbers of bringing people into the top of the funnel. Well, it creates massive problems for everybody further down, right? So having a way of actually measuring, keeping score that is not gamed is super hard. In smaller businesses, because you typically, the people around the table are more aligned about what they're trying to do, that's maybe less of a problem. But the first thing is, do we know if we're doing it? So do we know what we need to do? Do we have a clear understanding of what that is? Do we know how to do it? Can we decide how that's achieved? So what do we do to get that how? And do we have any kind of measurement system that lets us know when we've gone wrong? Because most of the time, if you're doing something new and challenging, you probably are wrong about a number of things. You might hope you're right about some things, but you're going to be wrong about some things. If you don't find out until the end, well, that's not very helpful to you. Okay. This is a process of discussion, primarily around board management, what have you.
So that actually takes me to my very next point about being wrong. So, very often, at least traditional older style companies, older style management are very much top down. The CEO comes up with an idea, everyone's going to go and build it. And they don't like to be challenged. So is a key part of your hypothesis. I mean, a key part of lean startup was to invert that, to say, ignore the CEO's ideas, let 1,000 flowers bloom, use, product discovery, prototyping, rapid testing to have lots of ideas, kill 98% of them, and do, feature or design or customer-driven development. I think that, and one more item is what I'd like to explore for the remainder of the few minutes here, which is optimizing for a local maximum or sort of global maximum, and then we'll come back to the first part. So one of the things is, once you've achieved your initial product market fit and you've got people liking what you're doing, you're now looking to grow your business. And growing your business, I think, can fall into one of two classes: either polishing what you've got now, reducing your customer support overhead, tweaking the pricing, reducing churn, which are great things. The machine becomes more efficient. Or should you do a big thing? And doing a big thing could just be, I'm always chasing new, cool, big things, and I'm taking my eye off. Can you do both? So how do you guide people to find the right balance between, polishing what you've got, which is great until you wake up and see one day somebody new has eaten your entire business because you haven't innovated, versus futzing around, forever building cool new stuff that nobody wants and ignoring the thing that's powering the business?
So there's a really interesting point. So it's partly driven by what you want to happen. Now, in the first case, there's no one size fits all tool or approach that you can take. The second thing is, inertia is a really powerful force. So once the bigger you get, typically the harder it is to make changes. The difference between, we need to generate a lot of new value, we can't extract that from the product we've got, we need a new product, and I'm not sure what to do with this product, so I'm going to take my attention off it and go elsewhere, is very important. So the first thing is, wise heads get together and say, well, how much room is there to generate more value from this? And you can do things like changing the pricing, changing the methodology, automation, which can drive more value out of the product you've got. But nothing stands still. So any product which is sufficiently successful is likely to breed competitors. So if you have a strategic timeline that says, you know what, we're going to ride this product this far to generate this value, and then we're jumping off onto something else, The best example of this is where you can jettison your existing product to somebody else to induce inertia in them and generate fuel to lift you somewhere else. Now, what you need to do this is you need situational awareness. And this is something most businesses are rubbish at, right? Because they're so busy heads down doing. The idea that you might stop and reassess the market and think about, and actually maybe I'll take a day off just to think is almost anathema in most fast moving businesses. Your situational awareness about what are your competitors doing? What is their strategy? How would I know if my hypothesis about their strategy was right and that represents a threat to us? So if you anticipate competition, say, you know what, I'm very happy to have a number two come along, we'll still be generating enough value, that's fine. If you haven't thought about it and you end up with a fast moving competitor, now you've got a problem. And often by the time you've realized that's a problem, it may be too late to do anything much about it. And that's, I think, where a lot of larger mid-sized businesses get stuck. They've ridden one horse too far and there's no obvious next horse to take. So
that's where they go buy startups, because
that's
they
when
can't innovate.
That's when they start accreting other businesses. Often the word strategy is used, but really it's just bulking revenue for some other purpose.
Right.
The number of actually strategic acquisitions you see where it's like this product, you can see how this creates leverage for this other product. There's not that many of them. So having developing situational awareness, having a good understanding of where you actually want to go. I mean, it's a bit of a bugbear of mine. I don't like really big businesses. I think they are. I mean, it's an ideological view, but I don't think they're very healthy. And they rise to a point where their only purpose is to continue to exist and grow, which is not really healthy. So huge businesses, like, well, that's a separate category. Where businesses still sort of have some connection to the people involved in them, a big question is, really, what do you want out of this? I mean, where does it need to go? And are you there? And can you stay there? And how do you? So forming a strategy that says, these are the kind of moves we need to make, having the situational awareness to understand what is going on out there. A key thing is very often people miss a change in user needs. So once you've been successful with something for a while, you kind of imagine that's going to go on forever. But actually, other things happen which change that need. So, for example, I mean, my mind obviously goes blank as soon as I look for an example. But if you think about, well, if we take, so, I mean, the iPhone is an oft-used example. Prior to the iPhone arriving in 2007, everybody said that business phones had to have a physical keyboard, that nobody would want to type on a non-physical keyboard. So an orthodoxy around user need has to have a keyboard. The iPhone comes out, and of course, suddenly everybody realizes nobody cares about physical keyboards. So all those people who were fully invested in that notion have made a lot of money out of phones like that over the years, completely wrong-footed. Now, they didn't have to be. Did they have a lab where people were playing with prototypes of? I mean, I'm sure they did. And I'm sure those labs told them there's something here. And I'm sure people at the top said, hey, don't kill the cash cow. So being able to actually adapt to a change of user needs is something most businesses seem to struggle with, even relatively small businesses.
Okay. So I think you touched, and then we'll wrap up. I think you touched on one really interesting thing, which is, you know, what do the founders in particular, at least in the early stages, want out of the business? And I think that's really, you know, I didn't think of it at all at the beginning of the discussion, but at the end, retrospectively, it sort of drives everything. So, yes, you know, people who start a cheese shop, in a couple of years' time, would like to sell a bit more cheese. Instead of one person serving cheese, they'd like to have three people, and they could be at the back doing other things. And that's success. Others want to be insanely big, borrow, you know, raise billions and change the world. So, you know, what are you looking for as founders? And I think this is something that many founders suddenly discover when they're going for their Series A funding. So when you are going out to angel investors, angels are going, yeah, if you're 3x the size in, you know, 2 years' time and I get my SEIS, amazing. If I get 3x the money, you know, the bank's giving me 0%. So this is amazing. And I pay no CGT on it. Cut to a little while later when you're going to talk to a fund and they're going, well, you know, if you're not worth $1 billion, frankly, in a couple of years, it's just not interesting. And you're going, that's insane. I mean, if we sold for 200 million, my wife would think that's a great use of the last few years of my time. But the fund is telling me it's a fail. So perhaps the following, polishing the little things or doing the insane big things. At SeedLegals, should I launch in 27 countries next year, or should I just improve my funding products, will be driven very much between what my business partner, myself, and our investors think is the right balance between organic growth versus putting all your money on 23 red or whatever it might be.
Yep.
to go big or go bust, and somewhere on that spectrum is good. And what are your thoughts about how to feed that back into your product decisions?
So there's you're raising some really interesting things here. So mythology and ego are a big part of what people want out of a company. My experience is most people haven't thought too much about it. They very easily buy into the notion of we want to be big, and sort of unicorn status has an ego thing. And I'm sure most of the CEOs of billion-dollar businesses have a very sizable ego, and part of being seen to be the best is part of it. I'd like people to be more focused on solving a real problem, because I think that's more sustainable. Now, there's also a conflict of interest. I mean, we know that the way VCs work is they work on hits. So they will sort of pan for gold in the stream, looking for hits. And they'll pan a certain number of pounds worth, and maybe you are one of those, and you're interested in them to the extent that they believe that you might be a hit, which means that they have to shape every business a particular way. Now, to you or I think if you sold a business for 250 million, you'd say that would be a massive success, because to the people involved, it would be life-changing, unless they've done something horribly wrong in how they got there. That sort of money is going to be transformative. But that's not interesting to even a modestly sized seed fund. They need you to be huge. Now, this creates a problem for every founder coming along, because it means you have to talk the language of hits, whether that actually matters to you or means anything to you or is realistic. And of course, the crunching of gears happens when you roll up talking about how unicorn you're going to be, and they look at your market and go, well, that's not going to happen. And the problem is you didn't believe it anyway. You're just saying it because you're expected to say it.
Never been there, never done that, totally deny it. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm not sure there's any easy solution to that beyond if you can stay laser focused on solving a problem that you can demonstrate is a good problem, that enough people have it, that they know that they have it, that they want to solve it, that they're willing to transact to solve it and transact with you at a certain level of value. Those businesses can always grow, because even if they grow slower than getting their massive Series A, they're growing off the back of something actually real. We see this all the time. A lot of businesses take a Series A round, shape themselves the way the VC wants to shape them. They don't have the product market fit yet. They've got just enough to get them over the line with a deal. They start to pump money into the marketing engine because they're told they have to grow, but the fit's not right. So they end up churning customers faster than they grow them. Their cost of acquisition skyrockets. Their customers, and effectively they end up very quickly in the red camp of the VC's fund or portfolio, and then they get jettisoned because they're not on a vector for success. And what could have been an amazing product success becomes a failure simply because it wasn't fit to do that particular thing. If you focus down on, am I solving a problem and am I getting towards what I want? So a test I use with all founders is, what do you want out of this? If you have to crawl over broken glass for the next 5 to 7 years and you get this at the end, you're going to look back and go, I'm glad I did that. I'll do that again. Or you're going to go, why the hell did I do that? What is it you want? And how do we engineer the business to give you what you want? And the key part is nobody else is going to care. Your angel investors won't care. Your VC certainly won't care. The only person who's going to care that you get what you want out of this experience is you. If you don't engineer a business to do that, you're probably going to end up disappointed. So I think it's understand what you want and focus really deeply on solving a problem that has value. If you do that, you can weather a whole bunch of other stuff. If you don't, you're probably a hostage to fortune.
So That has been fascinating. And by the way, I have a wonderful sort of yin-yang discussion with my business partner, Laurent Laffy, who's an ex-VC and serial angel investor. And although SeedLegals' business is to help you raise investment, Laurent's hypothesis is, often raising investment is a failure to not have to raise investment. And, when we play the yin-yang game, for me, it's like, yeah, let's expand in 27 countries. We've got all this money in the bank. Let's double the spending. And Laurent saying, actually the bad times are still upon us, and they may be upon us even further. We should not go insane. We should actually just build a business that becomes revenue generating and profitable. And then we're in control of our own destinies, and slowly, we'll grow. But of course, it's hard to have that completely sensible approach while at the same time reading TechCrunch with some insane funding round valuation. And you're going, why are those people raising 300 million? Dude, it's like, we don't need the money.
I think this is a challenge. I see this with investors a lot who are doing something great. Sorry, with founders a lot who are doing something great. And then they see typically an American pseudo competitor raise sort of 3-4 million where they're scratching around to raise hundreds of thousands. And I'm kind of like, well, what's going on here? Why me? Well, the thing is, as you and I know, for every business that gets that amazing round and goes on, there are 1,000 businesses that die unseen somewhere. And it's really a matter of, if you hitch yourself to that wagon, are you one of the lucky ones? Because there's not much else that can control it. If you've got a great business and you can grow it organically, then unless your ego tells you I have to be a unicorn status, I've got to kind of rub shoulders with Larry Ellison, people like this, you're probably better off doing it that way, because the chances become less the more you hook yourself up to people whose interests don't align with yours. I mean, it sounds like you've got a very healthy dynamic in your founding team, which is good, right? Because the more perspective, the more situational awareness. So somebody saying, you know what, the clouds are still around, we should perhaps husband our resources. And somebody going, hey, is this an opportunity? Should we go for it? I think is probably a great way to run things.
So to wrap things up, are there like the top 3 or 4 tips that you might offer somebody watching or listening to this about focusing, picking their next product, features, the way to get to those features?
So if you talk about getting to features, I think don't drink too much of your own Kool-Aid. So road test things with people who have no axe to grind, but no reason to care. So when you think about, hey, should we do this? Don't ask somebody who's potentially going to say yes because they don't want to offend you or upset you or puncture your dreams. Go ask people who won't care. Always ask questions like, how are people doing this now? So there's something that I was given by my sales trainer who has an HR background. It's called the change equation. And basically it's about sort of why people change. It says your probability of change is a function of your dissatisfaction with the present, your being able to envisage a clearly better future, and the difficulty of the first step. So whenever you're thinking about doing something in your product, are you tackling something people are actually dissatisfied with? Can you present them with something that is not just a little bit better, but a lot better? And can you make it easy for them to take that step? And if the answer to any of those 3 questions is maybe or no, think very carefully about whether you're really doing something transformational or whether you're about to make a huge mistake. And I think stay laser focused on your mission. What is the big problem you're trying to solve? And routinely ask, are we still heading towards that, or have we got ourselves diverted? If you have a very clear idea what north looks like, it's easier to kind of go, well, this is not north, this is not north, that's north. And what kills a lot of businesses is distraction by things that look like they're going where you want to go but aren't. So if you've got a good idea, we can see what north looks like, you're less likely to be distracted. I think that'd be my top 3.
That was amazing. So I was going to hop in and offer my top tips, which turned out to be exactly the same as yours. So I'm going to add nothing else. Whatever he said is the thing to do. All right, Matt, that has been amazing.
It's been a pleasure.
Watching and view and listening, this has been helpful. So when should people come to you, Matt, to follow up for advice, and how should they engage with you?
So my website is theartofnavigation.co.uk. And there's a contact form, but my email is matt@theartofnavigation.co.uk. I mean, basically any founder, business owner who is perhaps, I mean, typically sort of the development experience is not going as well as they'd hoped. So keep getting told the product's almost done, never quite done, or is in market with a product that is perhaps not performing the way they expect. So we've got a good product. Why are people not adopting it, buying it? Why can't we extract the value? I'm very happy to have a quick chat and just sort of see whether there's a real problem there to be solved.
All right, fantastic. And en route to getting to having those problems to solve, you're probably going to want to raise investment. So don't go to a law firm, go to SeedLegals.com. You find the investors, we help you close all the legals. If you've got any questions, Anthony at SeedLegals.com. Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.